Hey guys, Amelia here, and today we're going to be doing a very important experiment that many of you have asked for. We're going to be taking some acrylic yarn. Specifically, we're going to be taking acrylic yarn that is not quite soft enough to be enjoyable. This is the scratchy, itchy stuff that's kind of like even crunchy, and we're going to try a few common methods to soften it up. So I'm going to take you along with me as we test this on swatches, and even though this is originally for acrylic yarn, I wanted to see how these work on wool as well. So we're trying all the same methods on wool and acrylic yarn to see what works the best. So I really think this is going to be helpful for you, and if I can save you some time, then I'm really excited for that. So let's go. Okay, so to get started with our experiment, I have created some swatches that'll help us determine the difference that each of our things make that we're going to treat our yarn with. The navy blue yarn you see here is an economy type acrylic, and it's fine, but it is a little stiff, not only because of being kind of a tight gauge, but because the yarn itself is pretty stiff. And this kind of yarn can kind of squeak sometimes if you're working with it and you tend to have very tight stitches. And it's just not the best to work with, not the nicest. And so we're gonna try to soften up this yarn. And then this gray in these swatches is some wool, and you can probably see very easily that this wool is definitely really nice and like quality wool. It's 100% wool, but it is definitely the rougher, coarser type of wool. You wouldn't want to make this into something that's going to go next to the skin because it's just a little bit too scratchy for that. So we're just going to see if these same things are going to soften up this wool yarn as well. So what are we adding to the yarn? Well, let me set these down to just kind of sit here until we can add them to soak them. But if you'll notice, I've got one set to go into each of our bowls that we're going to use, and these two are going to be our control pieces. So I'm just going to set them to the side. And here's how we're going to set up the experiment. In the first bowl, we're going to use water and fabric softener. This is one of the most common ways to soften up yarn, and so we're going to try this. In the next bowl, we're going to use conditioner. So conditioner for your hair can also be used on yarn for this exact purpose. And so we're going to try that and see how it compares to the fabric softener. And finally, another thing that people will use for yarn is white vinegar. This is kind of a big jug of white vinegar from our local store, but I'm going to be adding the same amount of it because it's also used. And if you look on different places online, I will link the article I've written about this, but you may get slightly different amounts of how much you should put of these different products into your water. We're just going to be using plain tap water for this, and I'm going to be using 1 tablespoon of the product to go in the bowls with 1 cup of water. So 1 tablespoon of fabric softener into this bowl, 1 tablespoon of conditioner into here, and white vinegar into here. And they're each going to get 1 cup of water with a good stir. I'll make sure this is washed good in between because we want to get really reliable results. So we're just going to use the same amount of each of these. Now, that's not to say that using more might work better, but we're just going to keep it as consistent as we can, and then we'll compare them to each other and compare them to our controls over here. Okay, so we have our 3 bowls set up, and already something that I wasn't thinking of is that conditioner is not really working into the water quite as much as our other 2 variables here. And so that might be something you want to take into consideration if you are pre-treating yarn, because I'm using swatches so that I can easily feel like the entire thing when I'm done, but many people will use skeins of yarn and pre-treat them that way. So if you're doing that, you may actually want to be putting conditioner right on your yarn and diluting it a little bit. But I mean, we're still gonna try this because I can feel the conditioner in there. So now it's time for us to submerge our swatches and give them a good soak. Once I get all of these nice and saturated with the product, I'm gonna go away and do something else for 30 minutes. I am giving these a little bit of special treatment because I'm getting the conditioner right on them a little bit. I'm just trying to make sure they get on there somehow. So anyways, as I was saying, we're gonna walk away for 30 minutes, and then when I come back, I will see how these feel wet, and then we'll dry them and see how they feel dry. Okay, now it's been 30 minutes. I'm gonna go ahead and take each of these pairs of swatches and give them a quick rinse under the kitchen sink, only because I want to make sure that what I'm feeling on them when I kind of make the judgment on softness here isn't just the product sitting on top of them. And so I'm gonna rinse them for like 5 seconds just to get excess product off of them. And then that way, hopefully it'll be a little bit more based on just how it's affected the yarn and not something that's gonna wash out after the first time. Okay, so all of these have been rinsed now and my hands are dry, and just while they're wet, before I dry them gently, I'm going to compare them with the controls while they're wet and just see what my initial reaction is. So here's the wool. Okay, and here's the softener, the fabric softener wool. The conditioner and the vinegar. Okay, all of these seem way more pliable just because they're wet. The conditioner swatch definitely feels like it has some conditioner still on it, kind of like when you use conditioner on your hair and it leaves a feeling behind it. That still is present here. It doesn't feel bad. And then the fabric softener one, I can still feel a little bit of roughness. And the vinegar one maybe feels a tiny bit softer. I'm not sure yet. That's not my final judgment. I'm just letting you know my thoughts. Okay, so for the acrylic, oh wait, here's my control. Feels very stiff. Okay, that feels a lot better. That, again, it feels like it has conditioner on it. And that feels a lot better. I think these two are about equal for the acrylic with it being wet. And this one feels like it has conditioner on it still. It doesn't feel bad. I think when it's dry, it'll probably be reflected in the softness. But I think mainly these are all still wet, that it's not quite fair to compare them with the dry ones. So I'm going to get these dry. And for the sake of time, I'm gonna use a hairdryer since I don't wanna throw these in the dryer and have them get tossed around, because I think the dryer will make too big of a difference, and especially since you probably wouldn't want to put wool yarn in the dryer to begin with. So we're gonna use the hairdryer. Okay guys, I'm back from drying. I got these pretty much completely dry. There's a little bit of dampness maybe inside of the stitches, but several minutes on the hairdryer on each of these made a big difference. And I feel like I can really feel the fibers now based on that one. So I'm gonna go ahead and start with the wool again. And again, here is what the wool looks like without being treated. Okay. Now here is the fabric softener one. Lightly, it's very soft compared to the untreated one. Very soft. I think this would make a huge difference if you could feel this and you could feel the difference between these two. I think that would make a big difference in determining what yarns you may want to buy to make, for example, a sweater, because this is already much softer than the untreated one. Okay. This one, I'm just gonna Okay, this one doesn't feel greasy anymore. I'm gonna go ahead and feel this one. Yeah, these don't feel like they have a heavy residue on them. They maybe feel slightly different than the fabric softener ones, but this doesn't feel like I was afraid it would feel when it was wet. It doesn't feel like there's a layer of conditioner on it now. It probably, I'm gonna say, yeah, obviously these smell like conditioner and these are gonna smell like the fabric softener, but so you can pick, if you wanna give them a nice scent based on what you use, you could do that. Okay, and then the vinegar. Oh, wow. The vinegar actually feels extremely soft too, compared to this one. Wow. I am really impressed with that. You can see that. I don't know how much difference you can see looking at them really, but this feels really pleasant. Okay, now, I'm gonna save my thoughts. I'm gonna set the wool aside and I'm gonna feel the acrylic swatches. Okay, this is just so stiff still. This still feels a little bit, actually this still feels pretty stiff. Maybe my gauge was a little bit too tight for this yarn. This still feels stiff, just the outer fibers don't feel as abrasive on the skin. The wool, it just made such a big difference. It truly feels soft. The acrylic still feels like kind of stiff at its core, if that makes sense. Okay, I think the conditioner one feels a little bit better. Okay, and let's see about the vinegar. Okay, that's really interesting. I think that out of all of these, for the acrylic, because I know that's what a lot of people are going to be thinking of, for the acrylic, personally, the way that they feel right now, I'm leaning towards using conditioner or the white vinegar. I think they have very similar results here. Again, you can this still has a little bit of a conditioner feel, and this doesn't, but as far as the softness and pliability goes, I like these two. I don't like the fabric softener quite as much. And then for the wool, I think they're really similar. I honestly, across this entire test, I don't feel like there's a clear winner. Like if you just want something to make a big difference because you've got something that's very rough like this wool was, or very stiff or scratchy or rough like this acrylic, you could honestly do any one of these. There's not one that's just a runaway, okay? But based on just my personal preference and trying to feel like every little difference that I can, I personally like white vinegar the most, you guys, and that's really surprising because it's so simple. But honestly, the way that the wool feels from the white vinegar overall, that's my favorite. Like the difference that the white vinegar made to the wool out of all the swatches, I like the way it feels the best. For the acrylic, I think it did good. For the conditioner, I think that's kind of my second pick. But if you don't like if you don't like the idea of there being any kind of a residue feeling, then I would stay away from this. Because I really like this. I almost feel like if you wanted to do something for a baby and give it like a silky feel as much as you could, conditioner would be a good choice. And I think for the acrylic, it might have done a little bit more for it to penetrate the fibers. And then honestly, I don't want to disregard the fabric softener because again, I think the result of this is that you could use any of them. But personally, I don't think it did quite as much for the wool. And I still don't really like the way the acrylic feels. However, the only thing one thing that I did not do with this test is I didn't put these in the washer. If you want to wash or treat a large amount of yarn and it is acrylic, you could still try this in the washer and put your yarn in like a mesh bag. That's one method of doing it, especially if you want to do a lot of yarn at once, because then you can run your machine on a gentle cycle and then you can put it in the dryer, which will probably make a really big difference. You can still do that. And so if you already have fabric softener or something, yeah, sure, go ahead and try that. But if you want something really, really simple and effective, like go for the white vinegar. And those are my thoughts, guys. I hope that's helpful, and hopefully it's encouraging that you can use any of these and make a big difference. Again, these are all way more similar to each other than they are from the originals, especially the wool. But acrylic, it did a lot for the acrylic too, even not putting these in the dryer, guys. So that's my first choice. Conditioner would be my second choice, and fabric softener would be my third choice. And there you have it, guys. Thanks so much for coming along this journey with me to see what works best, and let me know if this helps you, and let me know if there's anything else you'd like me to try. Thanks, bye.